everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Grace of Military Child in Life. Today I'm here with a special guest, Amy. So, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
Yeah, so you're a military spouse. Tell me what it's like being a military spouse for you.
Well, I have been a military spouse for almost 15 years. My husband actually joined the Army when he was 30 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we went in kind of late in life, um, and we had small children, and I really had no idea what to expect when I first went in. I was excited because it gave me the opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom. Um, but I didn't really know anything else. And so it was very intimidating at
Yeah.
first. Um, Learning all the acronyms, learning everything. And that was intimidating. But once I kind of started meeting other spouses and other women who um, answered all my questions in very kind ways and kind of showed me the ropes, I really, really embraced the lifestyle. And so here we are 15 years later. I don't know how many, 7 duty stations later, maybe. Um, we're still living the military life, and I really, really enjoy it. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
weird, but I really enjoy it.
No, there are so many people who love it and even, probably very similar feelings going into it of being, very lost, kind of unknown of what's going on, sometimes scared or anxious and just so many different emotions, but excited at the same point because it's a huge life change.
Right,
And, it's just every single emotion is running through you. And then,
right,
you go through the lifestyle. And like you said, you meet people, you get um, to have all of these experiences that you treasure for the rest of your life. And, raising kids in the lifestyle as well is always a fun one to do too, because it's, showing the kids the world in a sense
right,
and not just your hometown. And that's what I
right,
love, having moved a couple times in my life. So, it's definitely a fun lifestyle that is very unique and fun.
right, right. It is very unique. And I am really thankful that we've been able to travel the whole country. I have 5 kids, ages 15 down to 5,
Oh my
and
goodness.
we've gotten to see all the, um, you know, highlights of the USA. We've seen Niagara Falls, we've seen the Grand Canyon, and
Yeah.
everything in between because we've been able um, to be in all different locations, which if we hadn't been in the military, I don't know that honestly, we with 5 children, we could have ever afforded to um, take our kids to go see Washington, D.C. and see all the monuments and all kinds of things like that. So it has been a very big blessing to our family in ways
Yeah.
I never would have imagined. I never would have imagined.
Right. Because, especially travel is so expensive nowadays, and
Yes,
it's so hard to even, just take your kids out of school and just
right,
go. I
right.
mean, it's a little easier if you homeschool, or my sister and I did virtual school, so we were able
Yes,
to, pick up our school and take it with us.
right,
But, if you're in public school, it's hard to take your kids out of school, and, a lot of people don't realize that um even though day schools fall under the state laws for
yes,
education. And so in Texas, we only had 18 absences that we could take. And
right,
so, doing that was hard because I mean, yes, my dad was wounded. Like, we were doing a little more frequently traveling than, the average military
the
family
average,
would have.
right,
Um, but 18 days adds up and that comes quick. And so
right,
you can't just, pick up and travel and go somewhere. But because you're moving all around the country and sometimes all around the world, you're able to go see these landmarks, see these like iconic US places that it's hard to just, I live all the way in South Florida. Like it's hard to for me to get all the way to Washington.
right,
I did that this year and it was a full travel day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Like So full on
Right.
travel day. And it was fun, and it's great to do that, but it's a lot easier when you're getting to live in all of these places that,
Yes.
something is in a driving distance from you.
And living in so many different states across the United States, we've been able to settle into a community. And I don't know, I didn't know this until we started moving around a lot, that each state, city, community has its own culture and
Yes.
its own uniqueness. And so each place that we've been has been very different, but my kids have gotten to experience um, lifestyles on one side of the Mississippi River and on the other side of the Mississippi River, in the North, in the South. And so they've been able to, um, use that R word, become resilient um, in experiencing all kinds of different people and locations and weather and all of that kind of thing. So
Yeah, and that's a really good point is, you don't necessarily think that there's different cultures within
you
our
just think
border.
it's the United States and we're just
Right.
Americans. You just think that until you really kind of start moving around and staying in a place for a period of time and
Yeah.
getting to know the local people and spending time in their community.
Yeah. Different foods, different customs, different traditions, all
Yes,
within, you know, even one state is so different,
right.
moving just in Florida alone, like South Florida, you have the beach coast, you have
Right.
inland Florida where it's farmland, you have
Right.
North Florida, where it's different. Then you have, so many different places. But then, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, and then moving to San Antonio, Texas, 9-year-old me, when I heard we were moving to Texas, I thought I was moving to the legit middle of the desert, like, country. Then you get there, and it's just like another normal city, but you've got different foods, like you said, you have different people, the culture is just incredible, and then moving
Yeah.
from there to Florida, it's so different. And then, looking to move again, like, oh my goodness, so many different places, and then just traveling all over, Seattle is so different, DC is
Yeah.
so different, Maine is so different. I could keep going on, but, until you do that and explore the country and be able to immerse yourself in it, find those local spots, get to know the locals, like, that's the real fun part of the
Yeah.
military
Yes,
life.
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's fun,
Agreed.
being so north, you have the opportunity to go to Canada. I mean, you can go to Mexico. You can,
Right.
depending on where you are, depending on what you're doing, you can go to these places because it's so close. And, if you have the opportunity to be stationed in Germany, the rest of Europe is a train ride away, I've heard. So
Right. Right.
yeah, it's definitely such a fun and unique thing that we get to do and we get to call part of our life because
Yes.
not many people get to do that, and even the military community separating it from, the rest of the world is the best community to be in.
Agreed. I agree.
Yeah, everyone just welcomes you, no matter what your military life journey has been. New, old, like military kids who haven't been affiliated to the actual lifestyle for, I haven't been affiliated for a decade, but I mean, my dad is always going to be Army. Like, that's just
Right.
who we are.
Right.
I'm always going to be a military child because that's a huge defining factor in my life.
Yes. Yes.
And so no matter your affiliation, no matter how far separated you've been from the lifestyle, it's still that community that you can always fall back on. And that's my favorite part of it.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's fun moving around and getting to meet new friends and friends that you can call family.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Whenever we move, I try to make the effort to get out and start meeting people. I'm not an extrovert at all, but I force myself to be social and
Yeah.
start acclimating to the community, not only the military community, but then the community that we've moved to, just because I find it to be really important um, to have support around us
Mhm.
as quickly as possible. I mean, it still takes time to settle into
Right.
relationships, but um, one thing I've found that has really impacted me is that when I meet people who are locals, I connect with them and I become friends with them, I always tell them, you are a great uh, piece of the military puzzle because you help those of us that don't have roots here kind of experience having roots. You help us root into the community
Yeah.
and give us a little glimpse of what it would be like to live in this community forever. So I always feel like that's an important piece as well.
Right, because the military, while like you said, that's a great support system to have because, they understand what you're going through. They know
Yes.
that, your spouse could or even parent could be getting up and deploying the next day,
Right.
with no forewarning. It could be like, okay, you're going on this deployment, tomorrow, like let's go.
Right.
Things like that can happen. And so you definitely need those people who understand and can be like, okay, no, I got you. Like we're gonna get through this together. And even people in the unit who are going through the same thing,
Right.
or in the company and, things like that. That's very important to have. But, finding those people who are like, no, I've been here for, my entire life, or I've been here for a good piece of my life. Like, here are my recommendations on what to do. Let me show you around the city. Because the military lifestyle is very transient. Like, you're maybe there for 2, 3 years. And when I moved to
Right.
Texas, my friend, I moved in the middle of my fourth grade year. She moved at the end of the fourth grade year. So I've got like half a year with her, half a school year at that, like quarter of a year with her. And so you never know when people are coming and going, and you never know when you're coming and going. So it's really
Right.
fun to meet those people too.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges have you had in the lifestyle?
Oh boy. Yeah. I joked with a friend right before we moved. We were at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and in June we've moved down here to Fort Bliss, Texas. And I had a great friend in Fort Leonard Wood, and we one night we had gone to dinner and we came back and we were sitting in the car and we were just talking about all the crazy things that we had experienced in our military journeys. Um, and I said, "Boy, I had to write a book about all of this because there was just the longer we sat there, we kept coming up with crazy stuff that had happened. Some of it's funny, some of it's not funny because there are legitimate challenges that I believe that if you weren't a military family, you were just the average American living your life who didn't
Mhm.
really understand the military lifestyle, I don't think you would have any idea
Mhm.
what challenges that families go through. Um,
It's like you're telling a fairy tale to some
yeah,
people.
and I don't know that they know the actual impact of you have teenagers and they get settled into a community and they make friends and they have all of their activities, and then it's just like, okay kids, pack it up, we got to go,
Yeah.
and they have no say in that,
Right.
and they just have to pack it up and go, and that's hard, and it gets harder as the kids get older because they want to have stability, they want to have their friends in the neighborhood they play basketball with every day, they all of those things, and so that can be very hard. Um, we've had a few areas that I would say are an ongoing challenge. Um, one is housing. It is a struggle when you roll into a new duty station and they have a process for giving you housing. And for the first 14 and a half years of our military career, we lived on post. We chose to do that because we felt like it was an easier option, um, because we didn't know what communities we were moving to.
Right.
We knew what to expect with the housing, not only the process, but the actual houses, um, size wise, neighborhood wise. It's consistent across all duty stations. And so we did that. And when we moved to Fort Bliss, living on post was not an option for us. And so um, my husband was going to be leaving on rotation very quickly after we moved here. And when we rolled up first day in town and went to the housing office, and they said, sorry, we don't have anything available to you. We were completely unprepared for that. And so we immediately had to start scrambling to find something out in the city of El Paso. I've never been to El Paso. I don't know what's a good neighborhood, a bad neighborhood.
Right.
Um, I had no idea what to do. I hadn't rented a house in the civilian world in almost 20 years. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I have to think back to my younger days when I was a college student and rented an apartment. What's the process here, you know? And
Right.
so, by the grace of God, it all worked out. We found a great house in a nice neighborhood. We have very lovely neighbors that are very kind and helpful. And so it all came together. Um, but that's a scary situation when you roll into a large city you've never been to before, don't
Mhm.
know a soul here, never never been here, I don't know any neighborhoods, and now it's like, okay, go find a house. Good luck. I
Right.
mean, that's everything you own is in your car, your kids, your pets.
Yeah.
You're virtually homeless for a period of time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's stressful. That's a lot. And so, um, I wouldn't consider myself an optimist necessarily, but I knew that we would figure it out,
Yeah.
and we would work it out and it would all come together. But there was some moments in there when that was very, very stressful for us. And also not only trying to find a house, but my husband had a rotation coming up where he was going to be out of the country. And so preparing for all of that in one big chunk was a lot to take, a lot to take.
Yeah.
Um, Granted, I've been a military spouse for a while, so I kind of knew some of the steps to take and kind of where I could go for resources and, rack my brain on if I knew and it were there any acquaintances I had in the city that I knew from a different duty station who I could connect with. I had to get very resourceful in figuring it out. And it
Yeah.
all came together, of course, but I mean that's a lot to take, and I don't know that sometimes people know that as a military family, you have chunks of time during your PCS where you are literally homeless. You're like, okay, this is scary, but we've got to figure it out.
Right. And I
So,
think that's one thing that you learn quickly as a military spouse or a military family member at that is how to be resourceful. Because you
yes,
can have those situations like that where you're like calling everyone, pulling every resource that you can to get something done.
yes, yes,
And even as huge as where you're going to live.
yeah, yeah. And that's hard. I mean, I had a van load of kids and a dog and everything that, were our most prized possessions in the van with us. And like,
Right.
okay, we got to make this work. We're going to figure it out. And initially joining the military, I remember pulling up to our first duty station in Oklahoma, same situation, like pulled up and said, okay, we're homeless. What do we do? Um, I probably was way more scared then because I didn't know. So this time around, 15 years later, I'm starting to figure it out. But I'll tell you what, though, one funny thing about being a military spouse. So a lot of the duty stations we've been at have been in more remote locations.
Mhm.
Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Lost in the Woods is
Yes.
way out there in the forest. Fort Drum in New York is way far to the north in northern New York. So a lot of places we've lived have been pretty remote. And um, so I thought when we pulled into El Paso, I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't know how big the city was, but I knew that there's not a lot around El Paso. It's just kind of out here in the desert by itself.
Yeah.
And so when we pulled in, I said, "Oh, I got this. I'm a military spouse. I know how the army works. I got this figured out. We'll pull in, get our house, get unpacked, and just start living our life. Okay, we got this." And when we pulled into town and we didn't have a house and we had to start driving around the city, and the city was really big and kind of overwhelming, um, I was humbled. I was definitely humbled and said, "Okay, maybe I need to not think I know everything because this was intimidating for me. Okay, maybe I don't know everything there is to know and I need to."
Just when you think you know everything,
Yeah,
there's so much more that you're like, "Oh, didn't know this one."
yeah, yeah. So that definitely happened when I got here. I was humbled.
And that's what the military life does to you in literally one
Yes,
day. It's like
yes, yes. In
it
one day, in one
throws it all at
moment.
you.
Yes,
Mhm.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's so crazy how that can happen because literally you can go from having one plan and knowing exactly what you're going to do and how it's going to work out. And then, you get there or you get a phone call or
Yes,
something happens and you're like, oh, nope, change of plans. And
yeah,
it's one of those
yes,
things and you never fully know until you get there, until something happens,
right,
until, whatever it is unfolds.
right. And I think that can happen in civilian life too, but with the military, it's just different because, I mean, you know, your story, in one moment, your family's life completely changed.
Yeah.
Um, you know, even last night, my husband just nonchalantly comes home and says, "Oh, well, I'm going to be um, gone at the end of January, so I won't be here for this and that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I better get that on the calendar."
Yeah.
Um, and that's a little thing, let alone for when he comes home and says, "Well, got some news." And then I find out he's going, on a deployment for 9 months or whatever.
Right.
Um, or just other even, bigger issues when you find out, you have a friend and you find out that, something tragic has happened to their spouse. And,
Right.
um, you know, that, that impacts you in a mental way,
It
because
does.
that things can change in just the blink of an eye. So,
Yeah. You hold on to uh those moments and you're like, this won't happen to me. This won't happen
right,
to someone I'm close with, to friends, to their family. And then when it does, it hits you and it's like, oh no. And it's very much cherish the moments that you have because you
yeah.
never know when it's gonna be gone. But at
And
the
I think
same
it's always
point,
I think it's always in the back of our mind too.
yeah,
Like when you have a friend and their spouse deploys and you're like, "Whew, okay, it's not me." But you
right.
know that your turn is coming
It's coming.
eventually,
Yeah.
or whatever the circumstances. It is always lingering in the back of your mind, like,
When's it gonna happen?
yeah,
When's it my
yeah,
turn?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think we all have that same thing of, even with moving, it's like, okay, well, they just left. When am I going to leave? Because I know it's
Yes,
coming up, or the
yes,
deployments, or, even the slightest thing of going out
yes.
on a field mission, you know,
Right,
so
right.
many different things. It's like, okay, well, it's going to happen. It's going to come up. And, those moments you have to live through. And it's like, that's when, you really have to persevere as a military family and just
Yes.
keep pushing through no matter how hard, you know, something gets. Because you have to look that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And
Yes.
whether that light is uh, you know, near of, okay, well, my spouse is gonna come home, my dad's gonna come home, my mom's gonna come home, or nope, retirement is 10 years down the line. Like I can see it already.
Right.
So you
Right.
have to find that motivation, that encouragement. And that's why like deployment countdowns are such a big thing in the military life. Like counting down those days until your loved one comes home or you'll see them again because that's huge. And that's,
Yeah.
looking forward and finding the positives that
Right.
in a crazy tough lifestyle,
Absolutely.
it's hard to do.
Absolutely. And I think there's two things in that that are, for me, I have found to be very beneficial. One
Mhm.
is to try and stay positive. Look for the things to be positive and thankful for. Um, and that encourages my kids. It helps
Yeah,
them say, okay, we can get through this, we can do it. Let's look for the things here that will be good.
right.
And also having support system, um, that I can't stress enough. Like I said, I'm an introvert, and so I got to push myself to get out there
Right.
and make friends. But I think that is a huge piece of the military lifestyle for me, for my kids, to have support around us, um, when we're going through a PCS, when we're moving, when we're going through deployments, to have, friends around us who can help encourage us. We can encourage them, help us stay in reality, look for the positives
Yeah.
instead of, because it's real easy. It's real easy to get locked away in your house and say, I don't want to meet anyone here. I don't want to bother. I don't want to get involved in my community. I'm just going to lock myself away and wait for my husband to get home or wait for dad to get home. And, um, that gets unhealthy very quickly. Um,
Mhm.
I, if there's one thing I would tell new military spouses is get out there and meet people. There's lots of ways to do that through the military. Lots of organizations on post that, or at your military installation that, can offer that. And yes, you're going to be the new guy. You're always going to be the new guy. But, when you're around other like minded families, you really can encourage and support each other through all the hard stuff that's thrown
Yeah.
at you. And it helps you carry that load so much easier. And I think it's just really important to, um, find community and find people, that you can support and they can support you and your
Yeah.
family.
Right, because, I will never forget, the people who showed up in the craziest times where it's like, okay, if I would have called, you know, some of my civilian friends, it's like, they wouldn't have been there. They wouldn't have understood, those
Right.
moments where I really needed somebody who actually understood what I was going through. PCSs, those fun nights. Like I will never forget sitting in an empty house with friends, and how
Yes.
fun and memorable that actually is. And, the crazy things that happen. And then, we were literally moving and then we got in a car accident and had to stay
Oh,
for 5 extra days.
oh, wow.
So, having friends like, we don't have a house. We just turned in our keys. Like, we don't have a place to live. And so, staying with friends and, people showing up to the hospital for us,
Yeah.
so many things like that is so huge. And that's like, people understand like a drop of a dime, things can change and things happen.
And I imagine for you, when you saw some of those people who showed up in those moments, um, that probably impacted you deeply. And now you show up for other people in their moments of need. I
Yeah.
know that's happened to me. Um, I made a really good friend that way. I saw an acquaintance of mine. Um, we had a situation where a spouse's husband ended up getting COVID and he got very, very ill. And I watched her from a distance completely wrap her arms around that family and take care of them and help them. And I was like, wow, I
Yeah.
want to be like her. I want to step up in a time of need and help other people, just like she's doing. So it was just so motivating for me because it was so impactful to see like how much she cared. And so in turn, I can do that for other people. And I hope and I know that other people will do that for me as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the people that you saw do that impacted you deeply. And now you're stepping out and you're helping other people as well, which I think is just, it's, the whole pay it forward kind of a
Yes.
situation, which I love that. I really love that. And I think that is absolutely at the core of this lifestyle.
Yeah, I think so, because I think, as families, we're sitting at home, we often feel like we do nothing, right? And our service member is out there making a change, and it's a little different because, for the most part, they're out on the front lines. Like we can actually see the difference that they're making
Yeah,
firsthand. And for us, we're like, oh, we're just sitting at home, we're doing nothing. But that's not always the mindset. It's you're serving at home.
right.
You're doing the hard tasks. And a lot of service members and veterans will say that families have it harder than they do because they're like, I'm just doing my job. I'm doing what I'm
Right.
signed up for. I'm doing what I told to do. But, um, spouses kind of have an idea getting into the lifestyle, what they're getting into. You either make the decision as a couple or, you have your spouse serving, before you get in a relationship. So you kind of have the idea of what you're getting into in a
Right.
sense, but not, you know you're getting into the military lifestyle, but you don't know what's coming for you. But then kids, you're like kind of just dropped into the lifestyle. And so but you really, I think military families as a whole really just strive to serve and to give back and to
Yes.
um like you said, pay it forward to someone else because you've been in moments of need and you don't have family, you don't have the support system you grew up with around. And
Right.
so you find your new support system and they just show up at random times.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of said this a little earlier too, but if you had to give advice to a military spouse, what would you say?
Yeah. Um, I would say absolutely give it a shot at embracing the military lifestyle. Um, Join some of the organizations on post and meet spouses. Attend some of the military events. Uh, I can't tell you how the feeling you get inside, and maybe I shouldn't base my life on feelings, but I'll tell you what, when I go to some of the events on post and I just hear him play, the national anthem. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, hit me in the heart,
Right.
just to attend those events, to meet military spouses, to connect with other spouses and hear their stories. Um, that's life changing. That's um, very impactful. And so I would say give it a shot at embracing the military lifestyle. Try to look for the positive. Most military installations are not in great locations, but every place has unique, beautiful aspects to it. So don't just hide yourself away at home and miss out on opportunities you probably didn't even know were out there. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
No, I love that, and you really have to get yourself, out there. You get what you give, and
Yes.
if you give
Yes.
more
I
and
love
you
that.
put in that effort, then you'll get it out, even if you're an introvert. So
Yes. It can be done. It can be done.
yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and
Yeah, thanks for
sharing
having me.
a glimpse in your lifestyle as a military spouse.
Thank you.